Welcome to episode number one of Can You Handle the Truth? I'm Steve Frazier and I'm your host. This is a podcast about facts and that don't need permission and truths that don't care how we feel about them. We live in a world where habits are defended louder than evidence, and occasionally this discomfort means something is wrong. It doesn't mean that it's true. So let's ask the only question that matters. Can you handle the truth? So the first thing that I'd like to talk about is what if the things that we defend the hardest are the very things harming us? Now, this goes straight to objective truths and cognitive dissonance. And so we're going to address that initially. Objective truths are things that are true no matter what you think or what I think. Okay. Gravity is a great objective truth. Cause and effect, our health. Things affect us biologically. We don't determine what happens when they go into our body. These are objective truths because our body then deals with whatever it is. And today we're going to talk about caffeine. I'm a subject matter expert. So, what does cognitive dissonance have to do with this? Well, when objective truths are presented to each one of us and they go against our long held beliefs, and we've been programmed. Some of these are good programming, some are not good programming. When they go against that, generally speaking, we refuse to acknowledge that they're true. If we dig in and look at them correctly, we realize that they are true. And so as we move on here, you may be uncomfortable, but look at what we're talking about. And do your own research. And I'll give you references, sites, whatever you want as we go on, and they'll be in the show notes. However, I can't change you and you can't change me because we all have free will and free won't. And that sounds kind of corny, but I learned a long time ago that I don't have the ability to make anyone do anything because, again, we have free will and free won't. So I am here to influence and educate. I'm pro health and pro knowledge. And some of the things that I say are going to be maybe controversial. Maybe today, maybe in the next one, maybe 10 or 20 episodes down the road. But today we're going to talk about caffeine. I am a subject matter on caffeine. I've done a lot of research. I wrote a book with over 300 references. And I have a tremendous amount of personal experience because I have 36 years combined history of being a chronic caffeine user. My first one was 30 years, and that's where my story started with caffeine because I was in the emergency room looking up at the EKG machine as my heart's going up and down. I thought I was having a heart attack. My wife took me there. I thought I was gone, thought I was dying. The doctor walked in and looked at me as I'm laying in the bed, and he said, "You're going to be okay. You're not having a heart attack. You're not going to die." I said, "So what's causing this?" He said, "Well, stress." And then he smirked a little bit, and he said, "And caffeine." And so I quit because this is 30 years of nonstop caffeine, and I was drinking a lot of caffeine. That morning when this all happened, I was traveling. I was on my way to a demo. I was going to work 12 hours. 6 hours on my feet. I was loading up on coffee. When I got to the co-op, I would have a latte, and then I would have energy drinks in the afternoon and possibly a soda with caffeine because I felt that this was the only way to get energy. So I quit for about 2 years. Now, what I had was called premature ventricular contractions. And what that is that everybody has them. I just happen to be very sensitive to them. That's how the doctor explained this to me. It was very uncomfortable. That's why I ended up in the emergency room. So the question that I have, and I'm going to ask throughout today, is do you know somebody that has PVCs, premature ventricular contractions, or heart palpitations, whatever you want to call them? Caffeine could be the reason. Now, what happens when we drink caffeine? Well, the first thing that happens is our adenosine receptors are blocked. Adenosine, this is up in your brain, and adenosine is what puts us to sleep at night. It's part of our circadian rhythm. And when they're blocked, we don't get tired. This is great for your mind, not so good for your body, because if you continue to do this, you are going to be exhausted, but you are going to be it's called wired but tired. These things as I talk about this, you are going to say to yourself, that could not just be somebody else. That could be me. Adenosine, the adenosine molecule is very similar to the caffeine molecule. So the caffeine molecule actually can go into the receptor and block it. Now, if you do this just once in the morning, you probably are going to be okay. And I say probably heavily on that because you automatically have messed with your circadian rhythm. And we're going to get to that in a second with cortisol. So the second thing that happens, and I'm going to show you this. This is interesting. This looks like a Mr. Potato Head, but it's not. It's your kidney, and the hat on the Mr. Potato Head is your adrenal gland. And caffeine has a very, very strong influence on your adrenal gland. So the first thing that it does when caffeine hits the adrenal gland, it pumps adrenaline into your body. And what adrenaline does is it puts you in fight or flight. That's called the sympathetic mode of your central nervous system. Fun fact to know and tell, right? You don't know this. This happens every time you eat or drink caffeine. Whatever source you're looking at, it doesn't matter. Caffeine is a molecule. As they say, you can put a pink or blue dress on a pig, it's still a pig. Caffeine comes in any style, coffee, tea, soda, energy drink, chocolate, it's still caffeine. So when the adrenaline rushes, you are in fight or flight. Now, this is a great thing if you're actually fighting or flighting. Not so good if you're sitting here watching this or listening to this, just sitting in a chair or in your car, drinking a cup of coffee or a Coke or a soda, whatever the case may be, because you're not going to use these things that are intended for fight or flight. First thing that happens is that your muscles are infused with glucose because it's energy. It's giving your body energy, remember, to fight or flight. Now, when you don't use it, what happens is that your blood sugar spikes and then you get an insulin rush because your pancreas says, whoa, I got to take care of this because it's what your body does. So your insulin goes up and then you come down. So you crash then. You come off of the sugar high. Now your pancreas at some point is going to be taxed and this can lead to type 2 diabetes, okay? Because again, you're up and down, and this isn't normal. So adrenaline is a great thing if you need it and when you need it, but it's not such a good thing when you're abusing it. The second thing that happens is the cortisol. And cortisol is a stress hormone, just like adrenaline. What happens is that cortisol every morning is produced naturally by your body. Remember, it's a stress hormone, but it's produced naturally to give your body that jump start in the morning. Now, when you introduce caffeine, it gives you a false sense of jump starting. So if you do it first thing in the morning, you not only have your natural cortisol, but then you have this extra cortisol. Now, if you drink any caffeine after this, it's again going to institute this process, start the process. So your adrenaline, your cortisol, they're all going to go up. Your circadian rhythm is this. It starts out in the morning, your cortisol is high, and then throughout the day, the cortisol goes down, and your melatonin and your adenosine go up. So naturally, I don't drink caffeine anymore. Okay, and if you're watching this, you can see I have a nice cup of coffee here. It's organic Swiss water processed decaf. Okay, it takes out 99.9% of the caffeine. Why do I drink it? Because there actually are some health benefits in coffee, not the caffeine. Polyphenols and antioxidants. And sometime we're going to talk about that whole deal with the antioxidants. But if we mess with our circadian rhythm, what happens then is when you go to sleep at night, and you are going to go to sleep, so don't misunderstand me. I am not telling you that because you drink caffeine, you are not going to sleep, because you are. Obviously, the 4 to 6 billion people that drink caffeine every day sleep at night. Here's the challenge or the problem with that is that it affects the quality of your sleep. You have four sleep stages: one, two, three, and four. One and two, that's when you start. Number two is your longest one. You're just kind of there, unconscious. Number three, though, is where you heal. So, and you also, like for men, this is where you produce testosterone. It's important and it heals your muscles. And stage four is where you have REM sleep, deep sleep, where you dream, and also where your subconscious is probably doing some repair in your brain. When you disrupt your circadian rhythm and disrupt your sleep cycle, stage three and stage four are delayed and shortened. This is a fact. I'm telling you facts here based on my book, my references. So when you look at this, that cycle happens 4 to 6 times a night. And then you wake up tired. And how many people do you know somebody that wakes up tired? And I actually missed the last question because the last question is, do you know anybody that has blood sugar issues, right? Because caffeine could be the cause. And if you know somebody that wakes up tired every morning or even can't get to sleep at night, because this can delay sleep, could be caffeine. Is the caffeine the root of all evil? Absolutely not. I'm doing this today and in the future when we talk about caffeine, because we're not talking about caffeine all the time. It'll come up in some certain conversations. But remember, I talked about 4 to 6 billion people a day drink caffeine, and that's pretty much documented. I did a podcast last year with a girl, college girl. She didn't know one person in her whole circle of influence that didn't drink caffeine. It's estimated that 85% of Americans drink caffeine every day. That's 200 to 300 million people just in the United States. There are perhaps tens of millions of people that are being affected negatively by caffeine and don't know it. And I'm not here to tell you not to drink caffeine. It's your body. It's your choice. Boy, that sounds weird, but in this case, it is weird. It's the truth. You decide what goes in. And I'm just telling you what happens when it does go in. Now, the third thing that happens is you get a dopamine rush. Dopamine is wonderful. Dopamine is your natural feel-good hormone. I get dopamine hit as I talk about caffeine because you realize that I quit for 2 years. And then, like every good addict, I started again because I could control it. I could control this. I'm going to be the one guy that's been addicted to something that control it. And I was absolutely wrong. So for 6 years then, I went back on caffeine. And 2 years ago, I quit cold turkey, which I wouldn't recommend because it was brutal. 3 days of severe headaches because that's when the adenosine receptors open up. The blood is rushing into your brain. It can be 12 hours, can be 10 days, depending on how your body reacts. I had brain fog, I had fatigue. I literally lost 3 days of my life. So when I talk about caffeine, I get a dopamine rush because I love it. I loved caffeine and I still do. I'm not going to drink it anymore because it affected my sleep. It ruled my life. I had to have coffee when I woke up in the morning. So the dopamine hit is coming through your adrenal glands and some other parts of your body, but it goes away. And then what happens? You crash. And the only way to get it back is to drink more caffeine. This whole thing is based on rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. So do you know anybody that has massive mood swings? 1 minute they're euphoric, 10, 20, 30 minutes later, they're crashed, they're crabby, they're anxious. And at some point, and not today, I'm going to talk about the different ways that caffeine affects men and women. I am going to touch on it briefly in the next 5 minutes because it's dramatic, the difference between men and women and caffeine. But realize that, do you know anybody that has any of these symptoms? Okay. And I'm going to be brutally truthful here. 85% or more of doctors and nurses drink caffeine. maybe more because they have high stress jobs and they feel they need this for the energy. When they see a patient and they have symptoms of caffeine, chronic caffeine abuse, the doctor rarely, or the nurse rarely, will look at them and say, that could be caffeine, because they probably don't have the same symptoms. That's cognitive dissonance or confirmation bias, whichever one you want to call it. Realize that if the doctor doesn't ask you how much caffeine you're drinking or what you're eating, because there's caffeine in some foods, then they can't help you out. I'm here. I'm here to guide you, not to do meds, not to do anything. I would encourage you to quit. When I quit 2 years ago, what happened? Well, I now wake up in the morning and I have energy. In fact, I'm the Energizer Bunny in the morning. I don't need anything. I have a sun lamp now in the winter. This was taped in the winter. In the spring, fall, and summer, I go and look at the sun in the morning. First thing, that helps boost my cortisol, right? That helps me get going for the day. I don't need to have caffeine to have energy. 5 months ago, I drove to Florida, and I've been doing this for 35 years. Last month, I drove there and back, which is a 24-hour ride. Now, we used to go straight through. Now we don't. Okay, we take breaks. But first time that I never had caffeine all the way down and all the way back. And the first night we got into our hotel, and I had driven for 12 and a half hours. And I looked at my wife, Brenda, and as she's hitting the button in the elevator, because this is locked into my mind, I said, I have never felt this good after driving 12 and a half hours. And I then went into the room and I went to sleep. Because traditionally, when I was drinking caffeine during the day, because I realized I wasn't drinking it all the time, it has a very big effect on me. And what happened was that I'd lay in bed for an hour to 3 hours sometimes. And then the next morning, obviously, I'm fried. So what do? I have monster cups of coffee. I buy these huge Starbucks energy drink kind of deals. You know what they are. And then drink one or two coffees or sodas during the day and rinse and repeat. Don't go to sleep at night, tired the next day. Then when I got there on the third day, then I would stop drinking caffeine and then I would be back to normal for 14 days or however long I stayed. So realize that it's affecting all parts of your life and you may not know it. Now, I talked about free will and free won't. And this is interesting because as adults, we do all have free will and free won't. But there's one person that does not have that. And if you're listening to this, I am holding up a fetus. The fetus is completely dependent on mom. Whatever she puts in, the fetus gets. And caffeine crosses the placental barrier and the blood-brain barrier. There's some very unique things when it comes to caffeine in the fetus. When the caffeine goes in, it blocks the adenosine receptors in the fetus, just as it does in adults. However, the fetus does not have an enzyme. It's called CYP1A2. There's no quiz, but it's important. It's an enzyme in our livers that processes 95% of the caffeine. So if our enzyme's working well and our liver's working well, it just processes it out. Now there's half-lives, okay? So it doesn't just go away. The fetus does not develop that enzyme until it is 3 to 6 months old. So when it's in the womb, it holds the caffeine for up to 100 hours. That's how long it takes the caffeine to clear out through the bloodstream, through the placenta. Now, if mom's drinking caffeine every day or even every other day in any amount, those adenosine receptors are going to be blocked. Baby's not sleeping. However, the adenosine receptors are a key characteristic of your brain channeling growth in neural and physical parts of the body. And so if they're blocked, the communication stops and the development can be disrupted. So in a number of studies, caffeine use during pregnancy has been linked to. Now realize this is not necessarily the only reason or the reason. It is simply that it's been linked to low birth weight, miscarriage, stillbirths, ADHD, ADD, and other developmental issues. Why would anyone drink caffeine while they're pregnant with these massive bad side effects? Because they don't know. So if you know somebody that's pregnant, you should talk to them about this and just tell them what's going on, because the baby is completely dependent on mom. Now realize that if mom quits for 5 days, the caffeine has cleared out, but then if she drinks it again, it goes back in. Okay. I don't try to tell anybody not to drink caffeine. In fact, I usually don't. I would encourage any pregnant woman or any pregnant woman that you know that is drinking caffeine to think about these facts. And you can go on, you can put these in search engines, it's all there. You might have to dig a little bit because you realize that we are battling a $1 trillion a year business. So the negative side effects, they don't really talk about them a whole lot, okay? This is what Can You Handle the Truth is all about. The things that mainstream media, whatever you want to call it, does not want to talk about. And caffeine is one of them. Now, I'm going to go a little bit farther with the man and woman thing here. First of all, a general half-life of caffeine is 5 to 8 hours. A woman in her luteal phase of her menstrual cycle processes caffeine 70% slower. So that's 2 weeks of that cycle. So if she has a cup of coffee in the first 2 weeks, it's normal half-life. She has a cup of coffee the second 2 weeks, it's now 70% longer the half-life is. So if she drinks a cup of coffee at noon, and generally standard cup is 150 milligrams, at 10 o'clock at night, she will still have 75 milligrams active. Now, once again, she's going to go to sleep, but her sleep cycle is going to be disturbed because she's got cortisol going on there. Her adenosine receptors were closed for quite a while, so her whole circadian rhythm is messed up. Caffeine also restricts or constricts the blood flow to the uterus, where the egg is. And so she may have a harder time conceiving. Now, this coincides with the male version of when a male drinks caffeine, and particularly a lot of caffeine, the cortisol obviously increases because that's a natural biological reaction to caffeine. What happens? The man doesn't get that stage 3 sleep where he produces testosterone. It's shortened and it's not activated as soon. So he's going to produce less testosterone. Now, men produce testosterone during the day. And sometimes that is through a lot of exercise. And here's some irony. Pre-workout drinks have a lot of caffeine, not just labeled, but also in some of the natural stuff that they put in pre-workouts that actually have caffeine that's not listed on the bottle. I absolutely acknowledge the fact that if you take a pre-workout and you work out really hard, you are going to produce some testosterone while you're working out. That's a fact. That's documented. However, when you're done, testosterone goes down, your cortisol continues at the same level, and cortisol and testosterone are, for lack of a better term, blood enemies. The more cortisol you have in your system, the less testosterone is going to be produced and present. Now, you combine a man with low testosterone because it's affecting his sperm, the mobility and the motility, and it can be fractured. You have a man that's drinking a lot of caffeine and a woman that's drinking a lot of caffeine, and they're trying to conceive a baby. Guess what? This could be the reason why they can't. I'm not saying that is the reason. I'm saying it could be. So if you are trying to conceive a baby, or you know somebody that is, and they can't, and it's just not working, but they both drink caffeine, ask them if it's worth it to have a baby to quit drinking caffeine for a couple months. Yeah, it's a little work. Do you know how hard it is to be healthy? We're going to talk about this all the time. It's hard to be healthy. You know, my journey, how I got into this is because my wife became chronically ill 13 years ago. She was 2 years undiagnosed with Lyme disease. So it caused a lot of damage. She was almost dead. And our daughter, who at the time, and you're going to meet her soon, she was opening up a natural health practice. She walked in the door one morning and said, I'm going to test Brenda. 15 minutes later, she said, you have Lyme disease from the waist down, confirmed 4 days later by her mentor. So now it's been an absolute challenge to get her health back, and she's still not there. But what did that cause? It caused us to go down to the natural health rabbit hole because as a result of that Lyme, she became not only celiac, but also grain intolerant. Now, just pause and think about that for a second because you can't imagine what it's like not to be able to eat any grains. We're talking rice, we're talking wheat, we're talking corn, we're talking all the other grains. So it took us 1 to 2 years to really establish what we were going to eat. We don't eat any processed food. I make every meal from scratch. Occasionally, we'll buy something in a can if it has 5 or less ingredients and I can actually pronounce the names. But why I bring this up is that all the things that I've talked about are affecting your health, and you may not know it, or the people you love may not know it. And so, do you know somebody that's being affected by caffeine and don't know it? And perhaps that someone is you, right? I mean, you take some introspection here. I'm not going to kid you. You have to be able to get past your cognitive dissonance. You really do. And this is not easy. But the truth can sometimes be brutal. And can you handle it? Okay. This is not my close. I'm just asking you that question right in here because it is hard. It was hard for me. We're in the next episode. Alex is going, and my daughter is going to be on, and we're going to talk about some things that are very uncomfortable when it comes to jabs and when it comes to having babies and things like that, because it's a natural health issue. She's also a mindset coach. So think about these things. So truth doesn't end the conversation that we're talking about. It starts it. And resistance doesn't mean something is wrong. It often means something important just got exposed. If today challenged what you think, what you believe, or what you defend, sit with that. Don't rush to dismiss it. Listen to what I had to say. Comfort keeps habits alive. Truth gives you a choice. So if this episode challenged something you've normalized, don't scroll past that feeling. Subscribe to Can You Handle the Truth? Because the topics ahead won't get more comfortable, but they will get more honest. And if someone came to mind while you were listening, send this episode to them. And please hit the like button. Comfort keeps people stuck. Truth sets them free. Can you handle the truth?